Hello, 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 and welcome back to my YouTube channel. My name is Jen. I have to record a little quietly tonight because my son is sleeping in the background. So if you hear any like weird sighs or snoring or anything like that, that's probably him. Luckily for me, he sleeps really heavily, so I can do this without, worrying too much that he's going to wake up. But so this is part 2 of a video I did before, and this is called 6 More Revelations That You Must Have for Working Toward Your Dreams. And the first one I did last week, so this one's kind of late, I guess, but there's been a lot of stuff going on, and for once it's really, really good stuff rather than the crazy, stressful, insane stuff that's been happening up until this point. But the shift that happened was literally a mindset / emotional shift on my part, where I stopped focusing on all the bad things that are going on and I started focusing on all the good. So if that tells you anything, I hope it resonates. And maybe if you're going through a hard time, maybe stop focusing on it. Let it work itself out. It might be useful for you too, especially if you're being hit with one disastrous piece of drama after another. Anyway, so this is 6 more revelations, the first of which being mindfulness. Now, being mindful, just basically means paying attention. You're paying attention to your emotions, you're paying attention to what you're thinking, you're paying attention to whether you are thinking more in a positive direction or a negative direction. And this can actually be a huge, huge shift for a lot of people. I know it was for me. And mindfulness, there's a lot to it. I've been working on the Executive Coaching Mindful Leader blog for a couple of years now, and it has allowed me to delve deeper into the topic than most people would be able to go just on their own. I mean, you can, but for me, it was more like I had to write through it, and I had to research what I was writing first and practice what I preach, basically. So it got me started into a sort of more mindful existence. One of the best techniques to develop mindfulness is, believe it or not, meditation. But also, if you think that's too woo-woo or whatever, it's literally just paying attention in the moment, being fully in the moment, in the now, like catching yourself when you're doing things that are not the best things for you to be doing, right? Specifically reacting. Reacting is not necessarily the best way to go about things. If you just act immediately on what you're feeling, that's not necessarily always good. So if you can cultivate mindfulness, if you can begin to cultivate mindfulness, then you're a lot more likely to be able to redirect where you are going as far as your internal monologue goes, which is very important because we tend to do a lot of negative self-talk. As human beings, we tend to self-talk badly to ourselves, like all our insecurities, all of our fears, they come out in our thoughts. And really that's just the ego. It's the ego trying to beat you down and keep you stuck where you are. And I don't like the ego for that reason. Like, I'm starting to form a kind of coexisting relationship with my ego, but it rears its ugly head, and it's like, oh, hey, yeah, well, you have every right to feel this horrible feeling, but maybe you should just go out and say it. And really, that's not typically the best decision to make. So being mindful just allows you a little bit of space between what's happening and what you're feeling versus how you're responding to it. And just having that little space is very, very good. The next one is emotional intelligence. And if you understand people's emotions and your own, then you're able to kind of get a backstory without fully getting a backstory. And you're able to put yourself in this other person's shoes and realize that they're going through their own hard times. And just like you, they have their own challenges, and they are a dynamic, multidimensional human being just like you are. So everybody has layers in their lives. Everybody has layers to their personality. Everybody has layers to what they do. And for us to kind of just step back and not judge it, and instead just kind of put yourself into the position of this other person and imagine, well, what could they possibly be going through that would make them feel this way, or that would make them behave this way? You know what I mean? So it also allows you to not take things personally if you can do this, because you know that whatever this other person is doing or saying or what have you is not necessarily about you directly. It's more about them. Because remember, to each and every one of us, our universe, our world revolves around ourselves, right? And though we are not separate, this still rings true. We are all connected, but we are all living a very unique, very individual experience. And that's important to keep in mind when you're dealing with anybody, including yourself. The next one is fail forward. So this revelation is important for working toward your dreams, because no matter what you're working towards, you're bound to fail sometime, and either you can get stuck in it and you can let it beat you down and kind of wallow in it, or you can choose to see it as an opportunity for learning and to improve yourself, right? So if you're constantly failing forward, if you're constantly trying something and then it fails, and then you're like, okay, well, what part of this didn't work? And you analyze it and you say, okay, let's go to this next part and see if this works. And then that doesn't work. Then you can say, okay, well, let's go to this other part and see if that works. And then it finally works. Depending on what you're doing, you might have to try this numerous different times. And you can tweak it. You can tweak everything. You can tweak your life to fit what you actually want. But you have to be in a position of mindfulness and emotional intelligence in order to get there, in order to do that, right? So it's kind of interesting how all of these things coincide. Failure is life's greatest teacher. And I don't know if you've heard this before. I hear it from Abraham Hicks all the time. Words don't teach. I could talk to someone with unsolicited advice until I'm blue in the face, seeing what their problems are, and from an outside perspective, from an objective point of view. But even if I tell them, and over and over and over again, it's not going to change anything until they have the realization or the epiphany themselves, right? So words can plant a seed, but words don't teach. And words can also make you feel not so alone in what you're going through, but they're not necessarily going to teach you in and of themselves. So failure is one of the best ways to actually learn where you're going, as long as we don't. What happens to most people is they fail and they say, okay, that's not for me. And they go and they move on and they quit, right? So rather than quitting after one failure or two or what have you, typically what happens when you get closer and closer to more and more levels of success and higher levels of success, there will be a lot of contrast, a lot of challenges, a lot of things that come up. And you can, like I said, you can choose to look at failure as a detriment, as a bad thing, and you can quit, or you can use it to propel you forward. And this brings me into fear. Fear is a very interesting thing because it is just an emotion, right? People think of fear as this like horrible monster, at least I used to. This horrible monster of just scary and darkness and whatever, but it doesn't have to be that way. It's literally just an emotion, and it's trying to guide you. But the really important thing to note about fear is that most of it isn't real. The fear instinct nowadays, I mean, The fear you feel when you step out into the road and you realize there's a car coming is much different from the fear you feel about doing something that's outside of your comfort zone, for example. And anytime it comes to growing or expanding or changing something, there will always be fear surrounding it. Even if you are very courageous, there's still fear. It's just that someone who is already courageous has probably already worked through many, many fears in the past and already knows that they can conquer it, right? And by conquering fear, I just mean you look at it, you take a step back and you look at it and you say, why am I feeling this fear about this particular thing? Is it because I'm scared of failing at the work? Is it because I'm scared that my content isn't good enough? And these are examples I'm using of myself, right? Am I afraid that my message is not clear enough? Am I afraid that my courses are not going to be informational enough? Or, you know, whatever it might be. Or am I scared that I'm going to launch these things and I'm not going to get anybody into the classroom, right? Now, the thing is that it doesn't matter if I get anybody into the classroom. I already have, but it really doesn't matter if I do. The point is to finish the courses. I can always market it over and over and over, but once I finish the course, it's there. It's done. And then if there is something wrong with it, I can tweak it. I can re-record. I can do whatever it is that I need to do in order to make it better for people, correct? And so fear really isn't that scary of a thing when you really look at it. It's just an emotion. It feels scary because you're scared, but it's just an emotion, just like anything else, just like anger, just like nervousness, just like anxiety, just like love, just like joy. You know, it's an emotion. It's telling you which direction you're supposed to be going, right? Now, while I sit here and I make this video, I feel good. I feel good while I'm talking about this because I know this topic and I'm very familiar with it because I just recently experienced this. So, and fear itself, I have experienced many, many times, and I've had to make fear my bitch. I've had to make it my stepping stool because what happens is you feel the fear and then you have to make a decision on what to do with it. Right? So I'm going to go to a really dark place here for a minute. Okay. My biggest conquering my fear memory is when my ex-husband pointed a gun in my face. And I was hiding in the bathroom and he said, well, I can shoot you through the door or the wall or whatever it was. So I sat there and I was crying, and then I stopped crying and this calm washed over me, right? And I decided, you know what? If he's going to shoot me, he's going to shoot me no matter what. If I'm going to die, then I'm going to die. I was 19 years old. And so I opened the door to the gun in my face, like right in my face, and literally staring down the barrel of a .45 like the song says. And I looked him dead in the eyes and I said, just fucking do it then. And of course, being the coward that he is, I was just joking. I was just kidding, blah, 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 you know, but, it taught me a lot about myself. It taught me my own strength. So if, I'm not saying that everybody's going to wind up in a situation like that by any means. I hope you don't ever. That was really freaky. However, fear of things like, for example, a more lighthearted example, I guess, would be if I enrolled in an online course, which I used to do all the time, right? All the time. I used to enroll in so many courses trying to learn things, and I would get through like the first several lessons or even halfway through or even more. And sometimes I would just quit. You know, and it wasn't for any particular reason that I consciously was aware of, but subconsciously I have this weird fear of finishing things, and I'm not sure what it's about. I'm not sure why. But I'm still figuring that out. And as soon as I can figure that out, I will share that with you guys too. So, but fear is literally just an emotion. And it comes from the ego. Now, if you're in fear for your life, right? If you step out into the road and there's a car coming and you have to like jump back, yes, that's definite healthy fear. You don't want to ignore that. However, if you're feeling fear around trying something new, then look at it and evaluate it and say, what's the worst that could happen? What's the worst that could happen? Really? And if the worst that could happen actually happened, are you going to be okay with that? Is it going to kill you? Is it going to kill your career? Is it going to kill a family member? Is it going to make anything permanently just go away? 9 times out of 10, it won't, So look at your fear and think about why you might be feeling this fear. And if you can identify that, then you're that much closer to using it as a stepping stone, as a step stool to your next level, right? And these are things that a lot of times people have to work through on the road to doing anything that is different. So for me, this particular journey has been about creating online courses. And I'm about to take another journey because I'm going to be recording and trying to produce my own music. So while I have a friend who I'm working with on this stuff, I still know that ultimately I'm going to have to learn these things in order to be independent with it, right? However, I'm scared to death of losing my originals or or messing something up that I don't know how to fix again, or you know what I mean? Which is why you just have to do it and you have to trust in your ability to figure things out. And once you kind of begin the process and once you have conquered one fear, so I suggest starting with a small one, you know what I mean? Once you have conquered one fear, it's much easier to do it again. And every time you do it afterward, it gets easier and easier and easier. Stage fright is a common one. I don't remember very well having stage fright because I was literally up on stage performing, playing music, singing, doing acting and stuff since the age of 8. So I don't remember having stage fright. However, when you don't do that for a while, even karaoke can seem like the most intimidating thing ever if you're up there, trying to sound good. So these are just a few examples of my personal things that I've, have had to overcome, and fear literally is just an emotion. So it's not that intimidating. It's only as intimidating as you make it, So the next point is that now is all we have. And I don't know if you've read it or not, but The Power of Now by Eckhart Tolle is extremely good. It's a very, very good book. It's very empowering. It's very informative. And when you think about it, the future is just projections of our imagination, right? Sometimes we imagine good things. Sometimes we imagine bad things. And when we imagine good things, we're hopeful and we're anticipating and we're excited, right? But when we choose to imagine bad things and focus on those, we're worried all the time, And in that state of worry, we actually tend to make the bad things come to light. Just like when we're in that state of hopefulness and anticipation and happy, we tend to attract more good things to ourselves, right? Because our emotional state attracts whatever we are feeling back to us, So the other thing is the past also only exists in our minds. The past is just us thinking back, either nostalgically with happy, fond memories, or we look back and we think of all the horrible things we've gone through and we're like, oh my gosh, this is so terrible. I don't ever want to repeat that. And we kind of get stuck in this cycle, right? Well, The thing is that the best way to work through those negative emotions is to talk about whatever trauma you experienced, write it down, what have you, but don't sit with it. Don't allow it to stay in your head. Like if you want to remember, but you don't want to stay stuck in it, I highly recommend keeping a journal and writing it down. Write a story about it. Write a manuscript, write it for your memoir, whatever you have to do, whatever you have to tell yourself in order to get it out of your head. That's probably the best way to overcome any kind of like past traumatic experience. At least it worked for me. Now I'm able to talk about, some of the things that happened to me without the emotional attachment to it. And people think that I'm cold for it sometimes, but I've talked about it so much. I've written about it so much. I've analyzed it so much. I've brought myself way more misery than what I should have by staying stuck with it for so long. But now that I don't attach any emotions to it, I can talk about it without being emotionally involved with it. You know what I mean? I don't really go back and imagine it over in my head. I just tell the story and I'm like, it's an experience that I learned from, and it's an experience that I can draw strength from. However, I don't want to sit and wallow in it, if that makes sense. So making fear kind of like a stepping stone for yourself is probably the best thing that you can do to not get stuck in it, right? So if you're scared of like the unknown, if you're scared of leaving your comfort zone, if you're scared of starting something new, then remember that the only way that you can get past that fear is by just doing it anyway. Do it anyway. That's courage. That's the very definition of courage. If you feel the fear and you do it anyway. So the next one is, and I know I went now is the only thing that matters and back to fear, but you kind of get the point. They all kind of interrelate anyway. The last one is don't listen to other people. So when you're following your dreams, especially when you're following your calling, when you are literally inspired and called and pulled to do something, you will find that there will be a lot of resistance to it. There'll be a lot of challenges. There will be a lot of what we would consider negative, which is just a label, things coming up in your own emotions and possibly in your surroundings and the people surrounding you that are change resistant due to fear, that are, I really need to do a video just on fear, don't I? I keep going back to that topic. But other people who are subconsciously afraid, I guess, of your success will discourage you. They won't want you to move forward. And I don't know if they're necessarily afraid of your success more than they are afraid of being left behind. And sometimes it might also be a fear of you raising the bar, right? So because you're doing something that will wind up being phenomenal, that kind of puts pressure on everybody else to live up to it, doesn't it? And what the thing is that no, it really doesn't, but it could be perceived that way. You know what I mean? Even on a subconscious level, especially. Now, those people are none of your business. Other people are none of my business. They can do their thing. They are allowed to be whoever they want to be. If they want to sit there and be miserable and not get anywhere and stay stuck, then that's fine. That's not my problem. I love them anyway. If they want to do their own thing and find their own success and make their own way, then I support them 100%, and they're still none of my business. But like in either case, if I can provide some information or insight or anything for them, then I will try my best. But it's still none of my business ultimately, and I can't do anything for them. They have to find it themselves. And that's just like you guys, no matter what person outside of you is kind of a concern for you, it's really none of your business what they're doing. And it's none of their business what you're doing either. So don't allow it to deter you from what your goals are. Especially if you're inspired, if you are feeling pulled to it, then do it. You have to go for it, because the regret of not doing something that you're called to do is much greater than anything that could happen just by doing it. As a matter of fact, if you follow your calling, if you follow your inspiration, if you follow your bliss, so to speak, then chances are everything else will find you. All the good will find you. The the things that are not conducive to your success will just simply have to fall away from your life. And sometimes that looks really ugly. Sometimes that doesn't look very nice. And so I highly recommend that if you're working towards something, to not really listen to anybody's advice about that particular thing unless they are already successful at it. So if you want to be a best-selling author, don't listen to, somebody who's never even written a book in order to get there. It doesn't make any sense. Now, if you have a mentor who is a best-selling author, hang on their every word, study them, look up what they did. You know what I mean? Research what they did in order to find that success. And that is how you're going to succeed. And it does take work. It does take action and activity in order to get there. You can't just expect something for nothing. However, when you're working towards something that you're passionate about and that you're inspired by, when you're following your bliss, it feels effortless. It feels like you're not even trying. So that's the whole idea about never having to work another day in your life, is by doing what you love. So on that note, somebody's opening the door. I will talk to you guys in the next video, and I hope that this serves you. Thank you.